Okay, let's do a short video today on the Polaris RZR front wheel bearing issue. I see it come up all the time. There's guys that are having all kinds of problems with needing to replace front wheel bearings and rear wheel bearings, but we're going to do the rear on another video. Let's talk about the front wheel bearing issue today. Yes, there are some wheel bearings that die an early death because there was either not enough grease in them from the factory, or you guys have been riding in mud holes, the seal failed, debris got inside, kind of turned into a liquid dynamite situation and destroyed your bearing. Not much you can do there, but if you're one of the guys that have replaced your front wheel bearings and you really weren't absolutely certain that the bearing was shot, but you still had a lot of run out in your front end. You jack the front end up and you grab that big tire and you can move the hub back and forth like this. You get that sick feeling in your stomach that something's wrong, and there is something wrong. Do the tear down. You're going to pull, of course, pull the wheel and tire off. This is the left side here. You're going to pull your upper and lower A-arms off, your tie rod end, your brake package, get that suspended in the air so you're not leaving all the weight hang on the brake line. Maybe put a jack stand under the lower A-arm, and that'll help to support the front axle as well. Then you're going to take your big snap ring pliers, and there's this internal expanding snap ring that needs to come out, and that's a man killer. You need to put a shop rag or something over top of that snap ring because when you squeeze it, and then you're going to take a little screwdriver and kind of get under the edge of it to get it out of there, because even with a really good set of snap ring pliers, that snap ring's a brute to get out. Be careful, and it doesn't help to have a third hand when you're doing it. Okay, now you've removed the snap ring, you got the wheel hub out, and you're going to worry this bearing out of there. This bearing is sunk down in there. And then now you've got the bearing in your hand, and you've determined that it's really, I just don't feel anything wrong with this bearing, yet my front wheel was sitting there doing this top to bottom and this, side to side. There's a failure that's imminent. You're going to take that thing out on the trail and you're going to have a failure. I've seen two different things. The most common is this OD wears down and becomes egg-shaped, and then the inner race of the bearing is allowed to rotate on that. Now I've got 4 or 5 different measurements, 180 degrees across here. None of them are consistent more than about 10 thousandths of an inch. Tells me something's wrong here. And this ID right here, this outside diameter right here on the outer edge of the hub is 39.85 millimeters. And I noticed when you put the new wheel bearing on there, you can actually wiggle the bearing, and by the time you put it all back together and you add the math from top to bottom, it feels really bad. That action that you get right there is only going to act as a lever, and sooner or later it's going to break, and then this wheel hub breaks. We've seen this repeatedly on the trails. Saw it one time. I knew there was something wrong when the guy's front wheel was really wobbling bad, top to bottom. It was really bad, and he complained that he could feel it in the steering wheel. So 3 or 4 hefty guys tipped the machine over on a 45-degree angle, and we had factory steel wheels, so that castellated nut and cotter pin were exposed right there. You don't need any tools to get to it. And with a big crescent wrench, we got to crank that nut down another turn. Oh, not a full turn. I'm going to say a third of a turn. Well, you should never be able to do that, and the only problems that they had in the early days was on some of these hubs weren't long enough, and the splines from the axle actually came through the edge here, and the washer that they had, the one supplied washer, let me get a picture of that and show it to you. The supplied washer wasn't allowing the splines to pass through, so you were actually tightening on the splines, and your wheel hub would move in and out on the axle like that. That's not a good thing. That's really an unrelated issue. I believe they cleared that up in 2009. But if you have to remove that cotter pin and tighten that castellated nut another third of a turn, or 70 or 80 degrees or something to get into a new hole, what's happened is this hub has fractured. It's broken back in this area right here, and it's now shifted. And when you tighten that down, you're just taking that metal and you're just pressing it tighter together. So you're actually driving your machine with 2 pieces of metal that are just pushing together as hard as they can. That's a prescription for a disaster. aim the machine back towards the truck and trailer, load it up and go home, because your ride's over. And if you continue to ride it that way, you're going to wind up with a wheel that's canted out or in, depending on where it landed. Now you've got undue stress on your upper and lower ball joints, your steering rack, your tie rod end, and your CV joint. All those are going to suffer. You're going to wind up with a $500 to $800 repair bill when this is all your problem was. Polaris developed a new kit. They realized it was a problem. They went back to the drawing board and they manufactured a new hub. And this hub now, the old diameter was 39.85 millimeter. The new diameter is 43.85 millimeter. That's a 4 millimeter jump. And mathematically, I think that winds up to something like 15% more area that can reach here. We have a lot more strength in this area right now, which is all the weight of your razor is supported right here, all the way around here, 360 degrees. I mean, this is where the buck stops, is right here. And when we were running with the smaller OD hubs, we were having problems. So Polaris developed a new kit, and the kit part number is 220-4717. The kit consists of a new aluminum machined wheel hub and a new ball bearing. The new ball bearing does not interchange with your old parts. The new bearing part number is 3514699. When you decide to order this part, it's a pure Polaris part. Get it from your local dealer. Go online, Google these part numbers. You'll find a source of supply. Do whatever you have to do to get the part. $77 shipped to my door. My problem is now solved, because now that this bearing has a much larger landing area on here, and remember, the OD of the bearing remains the same. That is identical. Just take my word for it. That's identical, because the new bearing is also going to go in to the cast iron bearing carrier here. That's going to go in there, and per Polaris's manual, they want you to use 4 short stripes of Loctite number 603. We used to call it 601 stud and bearing mount. Get you a small tube. Maybe you can find a neighbor or somebody with a machine shop that'll just put 4 stripes of it on there for you, 90 degrees apart. It doesn't have to be accurate. And that's going to keep the outer race of the bearing from spinning on the inside of the bearing carrier. Put the bearing in the freezer for a half an hour. Lay your hub out on the table. Have this all cleaned out. Get all the debris out of there. Wipe it down with a dry cloth. Remove your bearing from the freezer with a pair of gloves or a shop rag, or just put your fingers in the middle like that. 1, 2, 3, 4 stripes of your sealant. Take your bearing, and when you sit it there, that bearing is for the most part going to fall right into that hub. Take a 2x4 and a hammer and just tap it. Don't go after this with a punch, because when you do, you're going to slip and you're going to wind up with this situation right here. This was during the removal, and I was working very hard to hit on the outer race of the bearing, and I've destroyed that seal. That bearing is no good. That goes in the trash can. I'll never see it again. Or I might put it in the front seat of somebody's car, let them try to figure out what that fell out of. But the bottom line is, that bearing will fall right down into this hub. Yeah, I've never run into a situation where I've needed to heat lamp this or torch it or put it on a hot plate or anything like that. This will go in. If you do have a situation like that, maybe you do need to get out the old Coleman stove or something, or put it in the oven. That becomes a little bit of a problem. But irregardless, 4 stripes of your 603 Loctite, slide the bearing in, back it up with your snap ring and your snap ring pliers, lock it together. Total time from the time you pull it in the shop to the time you're putting it back out on the streets again, give yourself about 2 hours. You should be able to get it done. One more time, the Pure Polaris kit, 220-4717, 75 to 80 bucks delivered to your door. Your problems are over. Happy trails, guys, and live to ride another day.